for a very long time, actually. So I have had like a list of people that when I first started this podcast, it was like my top 20 plus people that I wanted to interview to talk to them about what it was like to leave a narcissist. At the top of that list was Bethany Frankel. And before I started the podcast in 2014, that's when the idea formulated, and I don't think I launched until 2015. I probably had been watching her for at least 3 years. Um, Real Housewives of New York. I had a yoga video of hers. I was a fan. I loved her spunk. I loved her spirit. I loved her honesty. I sort of thought of her as like this very gutsy, brash softy. Like she was very sweet inside. If you remember way back on those episodes, there were oftentimes she was the outsider. She wasn't married. She wasn't even, I think she may have started when she was engaged. She was the one who didn't have any money. And back then she was a hustler. She was always finding ways to make whatever business idea she had happen. And I just really, the entrepreneur in me really, really admired her and admired that she um, kind of was able to keep up with these other women who had these very different lifestyles than her and were married. Some of them were business people, some of them were just, wives of business people and had money, but she held her own. And then when she met her ex-husband, you know, I think I'd already had my older daughter, and I was just like, oh, it's her turn. She's got this guy who really cares about her. I remember being very happy. And back then, I actually was a Twitter person, and I would literally watch Real Housewives of New York and tweet and see what other people were saying. I got really involved in it. I don't even watch like TV with commercials and haven't really watched TV, live TV in many years. So it's just funny, like thinking back. But anyway, she was on my list. But then, as I could see through the media, even though her business was growing, I think she had her talk show at the time, she got divorced, close, very similar to my timeline. Um, I noticed that she wasn't saying a lot about it. And she's very, very outspoken. So it was clear that there was a gag order, that you didn't see any pictures of her daughter. And her ex, clearly made rules around that. And, they were working it through. Anyway, over the years, I have noticed a bunch of things with her. Don't follow her nearly as closely as I did back then, but the main thing I noticed was there was not a lot of talk about that divorce. There was not a lot of talk about specifically about her daughter, the custody, all of those things. She's mentioned it a little bit here and there, but not in any great detail. So even though she was at the top of my list, I never really sought her out to be interviewed. Not saying she would have agreed to be on the podcast anyway. Now there's like a gazillion narcissism podcasts, but back then there weren't as many. Um, so anyway, so this I'm leading up to this to say that she just did a live that I happened to catch on YouTube talking about her 10-year divorce process and all the things that she went through. So she now has full custody of her daughter. She's able to talk more openly, I think, about it. I don't know if there's stuff that's still off limits, but he dragged her through this very difficult time. And she talked about all of the different things that she went through, the abuse, the manipulation in the court, using their daughter, the gag order, all kinds of really sneaky, underhanded things. Not in great detail, but just alluding to it because I think what she's planning to do, and this is why I'm talking about it, she's going to say more about it. And I think she's going to decide how to jump in. But one thing she did say is that as she was going through it, she was thinking, she was going to use this to help other women going through this, which I love. And I think of all the people I can think of who would be amazing to share with the world what the reality of being with somebody who's a narcissist, what that's like, it's her. Because she's very articulate, she's very brash, very bold. She'll say what's on her mind, and she can, like, think on a dime. And um, I just think she's phenomenal with that verbally. She's very, very sharp. And one of the things that she was saying is like how how is it that somebody as smart as she is, she's capable, she's smart, she had all this stuff going for her with the show and all these possibilities, money coming in, fame, she's attractive, all of this stuff. And this person was able to finesse her, manipulate her. And if you remembered back then, if you were a fan at all, I mean, he kind of was like that slow burn where he kind of came in, charmed her, looked like this really genuine guy. But then if you watch those episodes, for me, it was painful. I was still in my relationship, and I remember watching him nitpick at her. She was trying to be loving and kind and work through, a situation with him directly, or maybe his parents or whatever. And he would just paint her in the corner as this horrible human being, making her out to be selfish and really, you know, standard gaslighting, um, just chipping away at her identity, chipping away at who she was as a person. And if you remember her, again, she was this very, I think, openly vulnerable person who would cry on screen and talk about her feelings and talk about how much she cared about her friends. And it was very, very genuine. So what he was depicting her as was just so, like, to me, I was like, he doesn't even get her. Like, how is he speaking to her this way? It just didn't add up. And it felt like, sometimes I would say, okay, is this edited this way to make it more, you know, um, dramatic, or is this guy really doing this to her? Are there scenes that are not there that we're missing? I mean, of course, all of that's true, but it was hard to know what was going on. And then when it all kind of ended, and then shortly after that, I think her liquor business was became a huge deal and was bought for a ton of money. And I think we're going to find out how much he tried to get a stake in her, in all of her fortune, that she worked really hard for before he even came into the picture. But I just want to wave a flag and just say, yay, whether you like Brittany, whether you like Bethany or not, because of who she is, because of how broad her platform is, because of how respected she is and articulate she is, I think she's going to be an amazing champion for women who are experiencing post separation abuse specifically. Obviously, waving a flag, just like my last episode about the 16 flag study, she was talking about that. Like, what are the things that people need to know to look out for? And she also talked about just being so in her PTSD mode that she probably will not marry someone in the future. Like, it just totally burned her. And, she's in a healthy relationship right now, but it doesn't sound like she's considering getting married in the future. And who would blame her if it took her 10 years to divorce somebody who she was only married to for 2 years, right? So I'm sure she's going to have a lot to say. I don't want to put any words in her mouth, but I'm interested to learn how she describes these things, what she shares, and what she's going to do with this platform that she has to both educate women, girls, like everybody, on what are the things to look for or look out for, um, creating boundaries, tuning into your feelings, your intuition, and also as a friend and family member, helping people. Hopefully, she'll talk about that. Helping people get out when you see these certain things going on. Um, and then I think post separation abuse, coercive control, manipulation, using the children, the impact that that has on kids, just draining her of money. She said multiple times, like, I'm a woman of means. If I didn't have all this and I couldn't afford to fight him this way with all these lawyers over all these years, any other woman who's not in that position, who's struggling already financially, or maybe doesn't have people around her as well, like, she's like, I don't know how they would even do it. And I found it just extremely, extremely validating. My situation the last 2 years have been very, very difficult. And that's why you've seen my podcast kind of all over the map. Um, my children have gone through a lot of things, and I like that she said she had choices to make. She wanted to protect her daughter, so I think she had a gag order for the court, but also, like, she put her daughter front and center and more as much as she might have wanted to be on a mission to help other people and, you know, get the word out, the most important thing to her was her daughter. And I totally understand why. And I've been in that position myself. And I've thought about, do I just let this podcast go? Is there a way to keep the podcast up? And as you know, I have the Audacious Mamas, which is thriving, creating a life that we want as women, creating streams of income, like finding a way to be independent financially, which is kind of funny because the last couple of years have been very difficult financially with my daughter being very sick and in and out of hospitals, and that affecting, like, her care has been very chaotic, not predictable. Is she going to be home 24/7? Is she going to be able to go to school? Is she going to be in residential care and treatment, away in a hospital, out of state, and then having another younger child and no family, or my parents are deceased. So for me, it's like, how do I figure this out as a single parent who didn't have a 9 to 5? I'm very sure that if I had a 9 to 5 traditional job, I most certainly would have lost my job. Um, and so these last 2 years of really, I just did my taxes, have taken me to my knees. And so I'm at this point where I'm trying to figure out where to go from here. I do freelance work, all that kinds of things. Haven't charged or done things with my podcasts. I've really been kind of just trying to figure out where to go next. And seeing Bethany Frankel's talk about her situation and the 10 years of hell, and then her statement about regular women like us who've been through something like this, it was very validating. So I'm saying this, I'm going to put a link in my show notes, to, go subscribe to her, whether you know who she is or not or whatever. I mean, it's just, I think what's going to come out of that, and I know she's also on TikTok. I don't know how much she's doing on TikTok. I'm more on YouTube because it's longer form. She can say more, do more. There's comments and moves a little bit slower. But, wherever you choose to, I think that's what she's doing, is she's moved to the platform so she can say more. And I know she also has her podcast. Um, yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. It'll be interesting to see what she says. I would love to hear if you watched the video, or if you've heard more from her recently. I would love to know what your thoughts are on that, and her as somebody who could be, a spokesperson for us. And who knows if she's going to get involved in the family court battle. That's pretty disgusting and seems to have gotten just so much worse over the last few years. It's ridiculous. Um, I don't know. We'll see, but I'm really excited because I really respect her. So yeah, so this is going to be on the podcast. I'm also putting it up on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is just my name, Stephanie Roberts. And you can put some comments there. I would appreciate that. I am going to start using on YouTube, there's actually a community tab. And I'm going to start putting some questions up there for you guys with content, because I do want to keep going with this podcast and Audacious Mamas. They do overlap as far as I'm concerned. My thought process is, with most of the women I know who either are getting out of these relationships, they were financially abused, emotionally abused, isolated, controlled, if or they're still in it and trying to get out and trying to put a plan together. So whatever I can offer, that's an option for another way to create a stream of income or multiple streams of income. This is for all of us. For me right now, I'm I'm like in experimental mode. So I will let you know how my experiments go. So I have some things that are very concrete and I know they will work, and then I have other things that are experiments. And if you want to follow me along with that, some of them take very little time. So go check out Audacious Mamas. And yeah, definitely subscribe on YouTube if you can. And then you'll see that community tab. That's where I'll put some surveys and things and try to get some feedback from you guys directly, because it's very hard. I've been pretty much invisible on my Instagram, my Facebook, and my LinkedIn, and even my Twitter. So I'm trying to work through that invisibility scenario. I know why I've been invisible. Um, Energetically, it makes sense. But yeah, YouTube, please subscribe, and I will see you over there. I would love to hear from you, and I hope that this finds you well. Thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with me. If you've been listening all along, if you're new, happy to have you here. And if you feel compelled to go subscribe for wherever you get your podcasts, I would love to have you subscribe. That really does make a difference with the podcast reach. And if you want to also leave a review, I would love that as well. All right, all for now, and I will see you hopefully on the next episode and on YouTube. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye bye.